Hi everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the FinOps on Azure podcast. It's Mike Stephenson from Turbo 360 here. Today we're very lucky to be joined by Obinna Nwokolo, who's a principal technical project manager on the Azure Commerce team. Thanks for joining us, Obinna. You're joining us from Detroit, if I remember right.
That's correct. Glad to have you. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you. So Obinna specializes in the commerce area, so he's able to talk to us a little bit about things like reservations, savings plans, hybrid benefits. And I know from all the conversations with customers that I have, it's a really sort of interesting topic area that I think people often don't know what some of these things mean and how they can benefit from them. And I thought that was a great opportunity to chat to Obinna and kind of, you know, just hear straight from the guys at Microsoft what things people should be thinking about, and we'll start demystifying this area a little bit. Obinna, before we jump into that, is there anything you'd like to share with us about yourself? Just tell us a little bit about who you are and your background and stuff for people.
Sure. Yes. As Mike mentioned, I'm a technical program manager, principal technical program manager on the commerce team. I've been at Microsoft. This is my second time around. You know, you find that the pandemic scrambled a lot of things for a lot of folks, and so it felt like a really good time to come back to Microsoft. That's where I launched my career. And so, as you mentioned, I'm in Detroit. I've been most of my career in the SaaS licensing, provisioning space, and you know, really, really interesting space. And I've always found it kind of challenging.
So, with that background, Obinna, do you go back before cloud as well from a licensing perspective? So you used to work with customers around server licensing as well?
Actually, no. So I, like you, I worked on, when I was at Microsoft the first time, I worked on teams that built some of the earlier products. This is before Azure was GA. I worked in for the Xbox team, and we built digital software delivery services, primarily in retail. So the ability for customers or consumers to just walk into a store, a gaming store, and purchase codes and redeem them for both games and the old Xbox Live services.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't until after I left Microsoft that I found myself in that space, primarily e-commerce at Microsoft.
Cool. So how much of your role involves customer interaction then versus product team sort of management?
It's pretty much 50-50. It depends on what time, where in the cycle we are. A ton of, you know, Azure Savings Plan is a relatively new product. We're celebrating the second anniversary about a week ago. And so depending on, you know, we historically had planned in cycles, and so there's periods of times where you're connecting with customers, both internally as well as we're talking to our sales teams internally, but also more importantly talking to customers and the implementers, folks who are implementing solutions for them, and trying to understand what are some of the challenges that they're experiencing with our products. How can we make it better? How can we, you know, delight them? You know, and we're obviously looking at what our competition across the other clouds are doing at the same time. And then, you know, as we get a sense of what we need to prioritize next, then there's more active and there's always continuous engagement with our engineering team. We've got a really talented team in Redmond that help build out our solutions, and so love working with them very closely. Very smart folks.
So just in terms of setting the scope then, Obinna, what do your team kind of primarily focus on that the audience would be aware of?
Yeah, it's three large products. There's lots of other things in the pipeline, but it's primarily Azure Savings Plan. And prior to launching that, the team owned Azure Reservations. And then the third piece of that would be Azure Hybrid Benefit.
Yeah, so those are like the big ticket items that you guys look after, kind of.
That's correct.
How do you, when you speak to customers, how do you find that customers are aware of those different features? I think myself, quite often speak to customers who haven't come across a few of them. Is that a common sort of thing you find?
Actually, we're pretty lucky. So Azure Reservations have been in the market for a good part of the last decade, if not a bit longer. And so customers are pretty familiar with it. I tend to talk to our larger customers because we find those are in the context of when you think about what a reservation is and what savings plans are, even though they are completely available, so they're self-serve products that customers can purchase, they become super impactful the more you use Azure. And so larger customers globally tend to be pretty familiar with reservations. And because we came to market second with savings plans, customers who are cross-cloud, specifically do some work with AWS, are familiar with the concept of Azure savings plans as well. And so that's they have a rough understanding for the most part.
Yeah. So what, like, if you let's imagine I'm kind of fairly new to this. What would you sort of say is the key differences between savings plans and reservations from your perspective?
Sure, it's we think about it in the context of really flexibility. Both their commitment offerings and their commitment in the context of customers are continuously leveraging Azure. In the case of reservations, you're continuously leveraging one or more resources in a specific data center region. So there's a particular VM, set of VMs that are constantly running in US East. If you're using it all the time, customers say like, hey, I'm constantly using this. I'd love to see some discounting around that. And obviously we want to be responsive to what customers are looking for. And there's value in offering those sort of discounts to our loyal and continuous customers. And so a reservation is really a commitment to a product in a region. That isn't always the case. There are some customers, most customers, in fact, have evolving and dynamic needs where it's not just a particular type of product in a region. It may be the same product in different regions because they have sort of a follow the sun model. It could be different services over the course of a day, or it could just be, I don't know, because my stack is continuously evolving. What I do know is that I'm using Azure and I'm spending a certain amount on Azure consistently. And so that's where savings plan comes in. It's, instead of being a product commitment, it's a spend commitment. It says I will spend X dollars per hour for the next 1 or 3 years, versus a reservation, which is I commit to using product X in region Y for the next 1 or 3 years. So that's the difference. And we expect customers should have a combination of both, depending on what the workloads, the characteristics of the workloads.
So would that be the case that if you have a reservation, say I've got a VM and I've got a whole bunch of other stuff, I can put a reservation on the VM and then my savings plan would count more towards the other resources that I haven't reserved? Is that kind of like a hierarchy of priority there?
That's exactly right. Reservations, because they are less, because they are more restrictive, there's a greater chance of risk. And for that greater chance of the risk of under utilization, they almost always come with a greater discount versus our standard pay-as-you-go pricing. And so you're absolutely right in the what we sort of think of it as a benefit application order. If there's a resource that is both eligible for a savings plan and eligible for reservation, we always apply the reservation first, and then we apply the savings plan for remainders, and then that's primarily because of the reservation's ability to be wasted, because it's so targeted, and also, frankly, the discount is greater, and so we want customers to get the most bang for their buck. And so the typical order is a reservation, a savings plan, and then finally the on-demand or pay-as-you-go rates are applied.
So with a savings plan, that's obviously a reservation is very restricted to a certain product you've bought it for. with a savings plan, I guess because I'm committing for an amount of money I'm going to spend, does that give it a wider range of resources it can apply to?
Absolutely. At launch, we supported 5 services. So you've got your virtual machines, your dedicated hosts, application services. I'm blanking on the last 2, but we did pick up over the last, since we launched, we added 2 more services: container apps, Azure Container Apps, and Azure Spring Apps. And so the idea is within the compute family, the full name of Savings Plan is Azure Savings Plan for Compute, and so it has the limitations around a region fall away with the savings plan, and it also supports a broad array of products. Significantly more products are supported under a savings plan than reservations. And so in a world where you have customers who don't know what the future will bring in terms of what they'll be using. Today you're using VMs, but you might be moving towards more of a serverless environment. Committing to a savings plan allows them to say, okay, great. As my needs evolve, the savings vehicle, the savings benefit will continue to be valid to me.
Does the commitment period differ in any way between savings plans and reserved instances?
They're both primarily 1 and 3 year. There are a handful of reservations that are available for 5 years, but we find that 1 or 3 year is the number. And obviously the reasons we have 1 or 3 years, the longer the commitment, the greater the savings. And that's the case for both reservations and savings plans. And so we try to make sure we actually consider these sibling offerings. And so as much as possible, we want customers to, we want some of the operational mechanics to be very similar in terms of, how you do your reporting against it, how you provision it, how you manage it in terms of permissions. It's just, we want to make that, they're very, very similar.
What about in terms of like a customer life cycle? Do you sort of envisage a typical customer would maybe start with a savings plan because there's a lot of unexpected volatility about the solution they're building, and then over time they would evolve to use reserved instances and then reuse the savings plan for the next project, kind of thing?
That's interesting. This is more anecdotal for me. Because reservations were an existing and more established product, we have actually seen the inverse, where customers have come in and they've had reservations, and reservations honestly come with a bit of overhead. You want to actively monitor them, so you're actually seeing, you have to have a certain amount of usage for them to be worth the value. If a virtual machine is running 3-4 hours a day, it may not make sense to commit to a reservation around that. And so what we've seen is that you had some customers who just, you looked at your workloads and said, these workloads are continuously running, let's get a reservation. But you may have had a giant percentage of your workloads that are more dynamic, and there really wasn't a solution for that. And so with the launch of savings plans, then these customers said, this is great, I can cover these workloads with a savings plan. And maybe I can look at some of the workloads that I've had in the past with reservations and say, maybe the operational overhead of monitoring and exchanges, it's not worth the trouble, so I will move primarily over. And that's more for the established folks. And then you have other customers who never really experienced reservations, and they just said, this is fine. I'm playing around, not playing around, but like I'm exploring, and I want to just access some of these savings and go forward. Again, part of this is just like the idea of FinOps. The more mature customer is in terms of their FinOps journey, the greater ability for them to monitor and respond. And savings plan, that flexibility requires less of that, and so but it obviously comes with a little bit less of a savings. At least the discount percentages are different.
Yeah.
So it all depends where a customer is in their journey.
Yeah, so I guess the savings plan's just more flexible and lower overhead, I guess, is the key thing I think I take away from what you've said.
That's
there.
Correct. That's correct.
Cool. So you mentioned a bit about hybrid benefit earlier as well. Can you share with me, for the audience, what hybrid benefit is and how you think customers get best value from it?
Oh, sure. So Azure Hybrid Benefit is the ability for customers to bring their on-prem licenses, specifically Windows Server and SQL Server, to the cloud. And so when as you know, when customers are running virtual machines, there's effectively two things that are happening. You've got the hardware infrastructure that the workloads are running on, and you've got the software IP that they're leveraging also. So customers that have licenses, on-prem licenses of either of these services, can actually transfer those and say, I'm no longer running these licenses, or I'm not leveraging these licenses in my on-prem environment. I want to take advantage of those licenses on Azure. And so, if you've got a couple hundred licenses for these various products, you just come onto the Azure portal and you effectively record it and say, like, these are licenses I have, they're no longer being used. And so as you're using these virtual machines, we are removing the cost, the IP cost, the software IP cost from your charges, and you're just only paying for the infrastructure. And that's why I'll add something to that. That's why the hybrid benefit works really, really well with savings plans and reservations. Savings plans and reservations are focused on the infrastructure charges. They don't actually cover the IP. So, but if you bring those two things together, you can effectively manage your costs and drive very significant savings for your workloads.
With hybrid benefit, then, so is that where if a customer has something like software assurance, let's say just keep it simple on SQL, I might have moved to the cloud, but I've got licenses I've already paid for my on-prem, so I'm just reusing those. What would typically happen when the renewal comes up for things like software assurance? Would you expect a customer then moves to pay for the license through Azure, or would you expect them to typically just maintain the direct license and keep applying the hybrid benefit?
It's kind of their choice. We support either model. For some customers, it makes sense. You can think of certain cases where there's not necessarily seasonality, but there's some variability. They still run some on-prem services or workloads, but for a period of time, they say, okay, we're going to spin some of these down, and that as a result frees up some of these licenses, so let's leverage them. If they are fully committed to moving towards the cloud, then letting those licenses go makes a ton of sense. But we're in a space where our goal is just to allow customers to do what makes the most sense for them.
Do you find, just in your real world experience, do you find this places where customers leverage hybrid benefit because it might fit the CapEx model better than OpEx model if they're doing a project?
Exactly. But again, honestly, some of that is just you captured things. It made sense to capture to purchase an on-prem license for certain projects, and as those projects evolved and maybe spun down, you still have these assets, and it makes sense to leverage those assets in a different way. And so that's but like those are great examples that you've brought up. It's like we think of it as you have an existing commitment or a commitment towards SQL licenses or Windows Server licenses. It makes a ton. It's actually a pretty strategic differentiator for us as Microsoft to allow you to just leverage it on our cloud if that makes sense for you, and when just bring it to the cloud.
Awesome. So what about in terms of the team's scope? Is there particular areas that you find customers might not know certain things about parts of what your team look after that you would like to share? You know, what's the kind of the right way to describe this, but what's the bit customers often miss that you guys do that they could really benefit from?
That's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things that we are happiest with, most proud of, is our recommendations. So we do what we believe is a pretty robust job of looking at the customer's usage and saying, like, here's the appropriate commitment for you to make. This has happened historically with reservations, where we say you're using this. Here's a particular combination of VM region that is used frequently enough that when we analyze your usage and we compare, you know, your actual costs for running those VMs in that region, and we say, well, if they had purchased a reservation for that, this is what they would have saved. And so historically, we've provided that for reservations, and it's a little easier with reservations because it's a one-to-one. I can say this thing ran for this many hours. Here's its hourly cost. This is what I actually paid. And then you could say, well, here's a commitment to pay for this thing, because effectively a reservation says, hey, you're effectively prepaying for 24 hours a day for 1 year or 3 years. And so it makes sense to make sure that you only make that commitment if you are leveraging that resource for a significant number of hours over the course of each day. And so we do that analysis for you and say, like, you know, this thing, you're using this thing, you've historically used this thing. If the future looks like the past, a commitment of this makes a ton of sense. With savings plan, it's way more complex, because we're looking at what you're using every single hour. And we're saying, well, your usage in this particular hour number one, you use resource A, B, and C, excuse me. And in hour number two, you've used resources B, D, and F. What was the cost of those usage, of that usage in hour number one versus hour number two? And then we're doing that sort of analysis and saying, like, well, you know, if you spent $7 here, you spend $6 here, the next hour you spent $8, a commitment of, I don't know, $4.50 actually would drive your cost down by X percentage. And then we present that to the customers and say, like, based on, again, we don't know what the future will hold in the context of which specific resources and where you're using them, but we do know that you are pretty consistent in your spend, and a commitment amount of this makes some sense for you. And so we expose that information in a couple of places, and, you know, Azure Advisor, where customers can see a lot of information related to costs. Like, it's not always about purchasing things. A lot of the recommendations we provide around virtual machine shutdown, or recommending the customers, hey, this thing isn't, the utilization of this is 0% for a chunk of these hours. Get into the practice of shutting down those virtual machines. That'll save you a lot of money, and it's also ecologically really the right thing to do. We talk about exchanges. You have over-provisioned based on the utilization of these CPUs. Scale it back. Use a smaller virtual machine. That will save you money, and obviously also the same thing about the ecological benefits. And so we look at we have these cost recommendations too, related to reservations and savings plans. So we're super proud of that. And I think that's one of those things that, you know, the things that we want to improve is making sure that customers understand how we came up with the recommendation, why it makes sense for them, and making sure that it is present and top of mind, so they can make, you know, choices saying, like, okay, the math makes a lot of sense for me to make a commitment if I believe that my utilization or my usage is going to be consistent to what it's been in the past. Let me go ahead and make this commitment and save my organization some money.
Yeah. So quick question on the saving plan then. So for compute, let's say I've got 5 VMs. So my understanding is the saving plan, you're based on the number of cores you're going to effectively use under the hood when it's calculating this. If I've got VMs of different sizes, and my compute, like my saving plan only covers a certain amount, how would it determine which one of 2 resources it would choose to put towards the savings plan? I'm thinking if one of them's like a high memory VM versus the other one's not, but it's had the same CPU usage, I'm guessing there's different costs between those VMs.
So, great question. So we actually don't really, each one of those virtual machines, and again, even the dedicated hosts or even your app servers, they all have a cost. They have a standard on-demand cost. And so let's say VM number one, the standard cost of it might be $1 an hour. Well, under a savings plan, under the 3-year savings plan versus the 1-year savings plan, and in this specific region, its cost might be 65 cents. And another virtual machine has a different cost, maybe it's 58 cents. It's pretty democratic in the way we think about it. It's every hour when we do our we call it rating, when we rate your usage and say, this is what the cost is going to be, we just literally organize it and say, here, let me see all your savings plan eligible usage, and we sort it and say which one has the greatest discount. The greatest discount is going to provide the most bang for your buck. It's the greatest ROI, and then we just work our way down. So you can find maybe a memory optimized virtual machine has a 62% discount, and then you have maybe a more GPU optimized one might come at a 58%. We don't really know the different purposes for each one of these resources. It's more of like, well, that's a 62% discount, and that one's only 58. 62 is going to go ahead first, and when we've consumed all your usage of 52, then we may turn of the first VM. Then we'll turn to the second one if there's still more of a savings plan and apply to it. And that's the way that allows it to be so flexible. It doesn't care about how, what workloads are being supported. It's it's a cost savings mechanism. So it's just like, what's going to return the most savings to the customer? That goes first.
And I guess on that example, if my savings plan covered all of the first VM and only part of the second VM, that would still apply the discount for that part, and I would just pay as you go on what was left. That's
exactly correct. In theory, imagine if you had one giant VM that you were using, a very expensive VM, and you had a small little, multiple instances of a series of large VMs. You could maybe have 1 or 2 instances covered by a reservation for that. And then the other instances are covered by savings plans. And if you just didn't have enough for a savings plan, the last set of instances are covered by pay-go. It's literally something as simple as that.
Yeah. I guess it's massive flexibility that you guys abstract a lot of the complexity of, isn't it? Which is really cool. So with the stuff that you guys are working on in the future, what are the things that excite you about what your team will be introducing over the coming months?
Yeah, it's really, we're focused. I think we've done a pretty decent job of bringing this offer, the savings plan offering, to market. What we really want to do is focus on making sure that we equip customers and partners with more, with the tools to be more, to make those decisions a little bit better. And so we definitely want to improve our reporting. We've had lots of, customers want better experiences around reservations or savings with. I'll give an example. Customers want to be able to understand. Right now we say, commit X dollars, it'll save you Y percentage and cover Z percentage of your usage. We want to provide a little bit more, some greater visualizations that help customers see that. We want them to see what their spend currently looks like, be able to compare that to what their spend will look like after they make a commitment. Because we think that that's, so again, while we're confident that our process of generating recommendations it's great. We want to reduce the trust barrier that exists where customers are saying, like, it's less of a case of like, okay, I'm trusting Microsoft as a good actor. I can actually see this and I can say like, yeah, that makes sense. That number that you're presenting me makes a ton of sense. So we want to improve those visualization experiences. We also want to improve the ability for customers to do some greater reporting, give them, whether it's provide some more out-of-the-box reports that help them think about the return on investment that they're seeing in terms of like their savings, provide some additional reporting related to things like chargeback, so that they, a lot of the work that they may have to do themselves in terms of building out these capabilities, as much as possible, We want to start providing reporting experiences that work out of the box for them. So those are a lot of the things that we're super excited about, making this product easier to consume and benefit from.
So I think we're just about coming up to time, Obinna. I think the last question I'd ask is there any sort of activities or resources you'd like to share with the audience of where people should go to keep an eye on the kind of things that your team are producing, or any blogs people should be following to keep up to speed?
Great, that's actually great. I can share a link to the broader cost management team, which I'm a part of, does publish a monthly blog that talks about the changes that have occurred each month. Definitely want to keep abreast of that. I mean, as far as resources, we do a pretty good job of documenting some of the. As much as possible, we want to make sure the experiences are intuitive, but there are questions customers are going to have around how to do certain things. And so learn.microsoft.com, specifically around cost management and reservations savings, has a ton of information, content, written content we've created, and also videos that we've created, short videos that explain how we do benefit application for savings plan, or videos that explain how we generate recommendations. These are tools that are super useful, and we want to make sure that customers are aware of them, because they explain a lot of how the processes work, and we think there's a ton of value in knowing and being transparent and understanding how we're providing these services.
Awesome. I really appreciate you joining us, Obinna, today. It's great to get people from Microsoft joining on the podcast and just sharing that product experience. We have a lot of community members and MVPs and customers who join us. It's nice to get people from the product team just kind of showing us the other side of the fence and what you guys are working on. So thank you for joining us today. I hope everybody has a great week. Any last things you'd like to say before we wrap up, Obinna?
Yeah, no, I'd love to say thank you. Thanks for having me. The community of folks who help make our products they're incredibly vital to this. These, folks like yourself who have deep expertise that has lasted for decades. I don't want to age either one of us, but the idea of just like folks who've been in the game for quite a long time, and they've seen technologies evolve. And it's really great to have a community of folks who are passionate about technology and who are there to point us in the right direction and call us out when we're not performing as well as we should be. It's great. What's that old expression? Iron sharpens iron, and we believe these communities are super valuable to helping us build great products.
I hope little things like these podcasts, it just gives us an opportunity to share education for people as well, where we're just being able to have a bit of a Q&A with someone like yourself. I'm hoping people find the little nugget of information they didn't know that they could benefit from, where maybe there was a question they've never had a chance to ask, or a question they haven't thought of to ask, and you guys can share those little bits with us. So thanks for joining us today, Obinna. Really great to meet you, and hopefully we'll have you on a future podcast if you're up for that.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it. You have a great day.